Well folks, we did it. We finally bullied Ninjakiwi into getting rid of the Paragon cap. In case you guys didn't know what was going on, recently Ninjakiwi updated Bloons TD 6.2 update version 33.0, and amongst all the big changes there are, there's been one tiny change that bugged a lot of people, me included, and that is the Paragon tower placement restrictions. According to them, they have set a maximum of 3 per game in 33.0, and well, that's because they have a baseline of general purpose DPS Paragons and want to move on into more synergies and interesting mechanical interactions between them, which becomes more interesting when choices need to be made. And well, they have heard feedback from the community about this because well, no one was happy when this was first announced, so they managed to increase the limit to 4 as of version 33.1, and they are planning to include a content browser edition They are planning to include a content browser editor function that allows players to set a higher limits or unrestricted in-player created content browser games. Although to be fair, I haven't seen a content browser game that uses Paragon, so... Anyway, even with the 4 Paragon limit, which I felt was more reasonable, a lot of people still weren't happy about it. They were complaining about going ultra late game with Paragons and wanting to test out every single Paragon and pushing the limits as to how much you can do with Paragons. So, well, Ninjakiwi heard us, and they talk about it. So let's see what they have to say. So, we wanted to speak directly and frankly with y'all about the Paragon limit issue. The reasons is introduced in the first place, and what our current thinking is going forward. We hope this look behind the scene helps the community understand why we've done what we've done, and what our plan is for the future, and how decisions we make don't always turn out the way we expect to as game developers. So the objective of Paragons was a method to combat the extreme power of bosses by, well, trying to figure out what happens if you combine 5 towers into one tower. And of course, we started off with the Dart and Boomerang Paragon as of version 26.0, the same update where Bloon areas was released, and it did a lot of damage. And what they've learned since then is that if all the Paragons do is just deal a lot of damage, then it's not going to make for a very strategic experience, which, you know what, that's actually pretty reasonable. After all, Bloons TD 6 is a strategy game, so of course. But not only that, the further you go into free play, the worse performance gets, especially with the heavy projectile weapons for mass Bloon population. So if you think about it, that really makes sense, especially when you have a high projectile Paragons such as the Apex Plasma Master and the Network of the Seas. So yeah, you can kind of understand where they are coming from in terms of performance issues, especially when it comes to ultra late game. So what went wrong with this philosophy? Once you have enough cash to buy a Paragon, it's not too much of a stretch to build another because, well, if you already have a Paragon, it probably means that you already have some insane farming going on, so naturally getting another Paragon is pretty easy, all things considered. And extrapolating that out, you could see that boss battles would soon become a farm guide for the perfect path of having all available Paragons on screen and insta-killing the tier 5 elite when it spawns, which, I'll be honest, if you really think about it, yeah, bosses aren't really just farm guides if you think about it. Because even my boss videos, it's all just farm guides on what's the best way to farm for this specific map. And again, this doesn't feel like a good experience. They wanted people to come up with interesting Paragon combinations to take down bosses and free play late rounds rather than just mash all the high DPS stuff on the screen. And as well as that, the tons of damage philosophy felt really limiting, and we'll get more into this later. We really like to see Paragons have synergy between them, with less focus on pure damage and more focus on interesting synergies and activated abilities. Therefore, the idea of a Paragon limit was born. 3 felt like a good number because that was limiting enough, but still give you a choice to provide lots of flexibility for different builds to emerge. And we have implemented this limit as of version 32.0, and well, let's just say the rest is history. Now you can kind of understand where Ninjakiwi is coming from with this mindset, but the problem is that bosses itself, like, they don't feel unique enough to warrant synergies besides the fact that they are high DPS towers. Like, I'm not trying to bring down Ninjakiwi here, but it's kind of difficult if you want to have synergies between towers, but with the current, well, bosses that you have. Bloon is the easiest example to make out of. It's usually just a boss with a million health, and like, you don't need any synergy or special combinations to take it down. LYCH is sort of a higher DPS boss in the sense that it's it's lower in terms of overall boss health, it's lower, but in terms of the boons that it spawns out, when you combine that together, then you have a boss with way higher DPS, or rather more higher health. I don't know why I said DPS. So yeah, LYCH is basically just Lunarius but tougher if you really think about it. The only arguable exception is Vortex as of now, because Vortex is able to spawn nearby Paragons, including, which means that using towers that have short range such as the Ninja Paragon or even the Boomerang Paragon, it makes it extremely difficult for you to beat, well, Vortex. So ideally you want a tower that you can place quite far away but still able to deal quite a lot of damage, and that's where you think, oh, Network of the Seas, that's a really good Paragon to use for the boss. Or even the brand new Golaith Doomship, the Ace Paragon, you can place it far away, and if you have the Wing Monkey especially, no matter what, the plane will get stunned, and that's a really good synergy. And that's kind of synergy that I think Ninjakiwi is thinking about implementing, but also it's kind of difficult for us players to use the synergy, especially since there really isn't a reason to find synergy, especially when most of the time, especially when you're looking at the leaderboards, you're just looking for towers that deal the highest DPS to, well, bosses, so that you can insta kill them and get the lowest possible time on the leaderboard. Now, of course, Ninjakiwi is planning to add more bosses in the future, but I feel like if they were to add the Paragon limit earlier than intended, as they have done this time, then it would have worked out well exactly how it went down. They got a lot of backlash for that, I'll be honest, quite a lot more than they actually deserve, especially since it is a really niche use. But still, was it warranted? I feel it's warranted for us to, well, not go after Ninjakiwi but rather complain about this feature. But yeah, maybe timing is the real issue here. Maybe if they delayed the updates to a later time when there's actually more bosses and where synergies could actually be useful, rather than implementing it early and not actually giving us the synergies yet, maybe things would have worked out better for Ninjakiwi. Maybe they have a better case as to limiting Paragons right now. But even if you limit them, there's still the huge issue of free play, because Bloons TD 6 is not just a competitive game, it's also a casual game for a lot of people, I'll be honest. So if you're only appealing to the competitive base and you're leaving out the casual base, which I'll be honest is like 99% of the people, or rather 90% of the Bloons TD 6 player base, then you're sort of eliminating a lot of the fan base at the same time. So understandably, this update was meant for the more competitive players, but even us competitive players, we didn't really like the change because of the mentions I mentioned previously. So yeah, that is my personal take on what actually went wrong with the Paragon limits. But let's see what Ninjakiwi says about it. So we saw the community feedback and the team was disappointed to see that what felt like a tweak to us to enable more design flexibility and protect late game performance has affected the community in such a negative way. This meant that the new maps, one that came straight from the community competition we ran, the Doomship, and all the cosmetic updates in the updates didn't get a chance to shine and have the same community excitements that usually accompanies a new update. And this is actually true. If you have browsed through the subreddit, like 90% of the time before this post was dropped, it's literally just complaints about the Paragon limits and to be fair, constructive criticism about why the Paragon limit shouldn't be a thing. And honestly, I do agree with a lot of those posts. You guys can browse through the subreddits to find some of these old posts. Now, we didn't intend to stifle anyone's creativity or limit anyone's fun in free play, and as we had looked into the stats around Paragons and saw that only 0.08% of games in Update 32.0 ended with more than 3 Paragons being built, did not expect this to affect the community as much as it has. Now, this is the thing that bugged me about this post, the 0.08% figure. How was it derived? Are you including all games with Paragons? Or are you including all games that have both Paragons and no Paragons? Because they make a difference. Are you also including games that are played on boss runs? Because everyone will definitely get Paragons on boss runs. Like if you don't, there's no way you're beating a boss on time, or let alone you can beat a tier 5 boss if Maybe on normal you can, but on elite, that's nearly impossible. Actually, it is impossible. So the lack of specificity about how they derive the 0.08% figure is probably another reason as to why they screwed up this badly, because I don't know whether they know where the 0.08% figure comes from. Like, how was this figure derived? Because if you're saying that only 0.08% of the community decide that 3 or more paragons can be built, which like I still see doubt, so most people get 3 paragons on elite bosses especially, then yeah. But anyway, statistics aside, from 33.1 we had very little time and we needed to process the massive reaction from y'all in regards to what we want to accomplish with this change. So we've since bumped the limit to 4, as that was a quick and easy change. We still believe that a limit to a number of paragons you can have in certain situations is an integral part of keeping the game balanced and fun, and that is actually true. I do enjoy some of the challenges from the previous boss ones where there's a paragon restriction, and naturally I was not happy with those changes, but still I still felt that it did give Bloons TD a challenge. It does give it a breather of fresh air, if you will. So let's continue. In the future, we like paragons to synergize with each other more, providing buffs and making builds that will drastically affect the performance for each paragon. And the first example of this will be obviously the never inheriting the 5xx buff to planes that's being applied to the Golaith Doomship. A change we were pushing to include in the 3.0 but ran out of time. Which, you know what, that's fair, because honestly thinking about how to scale up this buff with Paragon decrease, to be fair, it does make this challenging, so I kind of understand where they're coming from. And this will be coming in 34.0, as we have learned through 33 major game updates though. The more you buff attack speed and pierce, the more performance suffers, and that is true if you try many projectiles mods or something similar to that, or even the speed up mod, which technically does massively increase the amount of projectiles on screen at once, or the number of projectiles is processing at once, then yeah, you will see performance suffer. And even though Bloons TD is, well, let's be honest, it's not made on the engine that is best suited for late game games, yeah, it's you can see where they're coming from with this. With that said, we hear loud and clear the feedback on being able to do whatever you want in normal gameplay. Sometimes you just want to load up monkey medals easy and see how many monkeys you can place, blues you can pop, and the chaos you create. We get that. And if you really just want to melt your RTX 4090 or 1500 with all paragons, then power to you. Which honestly, that'll be a really fun challenge to do. But I don't have a 4090, so anyway, we'll be removing the Paragon limit from base Bloons TD gameplay in or before updates 34.0. We will be keeping the limit for bosses, and in 34.0 we will be adding it as an optional parameter for the challenge creation. We will also keep it in contested territory, though it's much less relevant here, as our goal is to keep competitive Bloons TD within the Paragon limit rule set. In each case, the limit will be modifiable by us per event, so some bosses might have a higher lower limit. We strongly believe this change is necessary for Paragons to keep being interesting, relevant, and fun in nature. However, we also recognize your right to play the base game however you please. We think this is the best way forward, and hopefully you agree. And honestly, I do agree. That's a pretty good change for quite some time actually. And we deeply appreciate our community's thoughts and feelings on the matters that are important to them. So, with that being said, what have they done about this? Well, since that post, update 33.2 has dropped, and, well, the Paragon limits has not been removed yet, but, well, to be fair, there are bugs within it, and I'd rather have a game that have no bugs than, you know, with this. I mean, I'm thinking about the Battles 2 situation here, but anyway, they say that this will be coming in 33.3, which means that the version 33.3 is definitely coming soon, which, okay, that's interesting. And yeah, that's it for this video. Honestly, I'm quite happy or rather impressed with the fact that despite Ninjakiwi being a really large gaming company by this point, they still listen to community feedback, and I think that's what has been keeping the Bloons community together for so long. Like, I've been playing since the regular Bloons era, like 2008, 2009, like the original Bloons games. And yeah, Ninjakiwi has come a long way. But they still stuck to their indie developer roots, which I kind of appreciate, and I really hope that more major gaming companies do that, where they actually listen to the player base rather than, you know, actually make changes to the game just because they want more money, which we see how that worked out in Battles 2. So yeah, it's kind of a wonder with the things that you can accomplish when on a game like Bloons TD 6, where it's so pay once and play, where you're not that focused on monetary incentive, you could actually make a good game. And yeah, there's really nothing else for me to say here other than thank you Ninjakiwi for listening to the community feedback as per usual, and hopefully there'll be more good updates coming to Bloons TD 6. So good job guys. When I see the way you look, shaken by how long it took, I would do about anything. I could even learn how to love.